The next muscle we're going to take a look at is the trapezius. So this is going to be this big one right here, covering a big portion of your neck and your back. Trapezius is really important when it comes to, of course, moving your head, so tilting your head backwards and tilting your head sideways. And it's also going to be very, very important in pulling your shoulders up or back. The trapezius is also called by many the traps, just because it's a little bit easier to say. So your trapezius is going to be attached to a number of bones. So more importantly here, it attaches to kind of the end of the clavicle towards the humerus, towards the ball of the humerus, and also to the entire top portion of the scapula. Also, it attaches at the base of your skull and is going to attach pretty much its entire length vertically onto the spine, so to the majority of your vertebrae. All right, now let's take a look at how to draw the trapezius. So the overall shape of the trapezius is going to be, it's a complicated, kind of a tricky shape to simplify, but the way I always think about it is that it's going to be a concave diamond, right? So something like this, or like a simple star. So the way, like we know, the trapezius attaches to a number of bones. So we have to make sure that we draw the skeleton first, because this is going to indicate where the trapezius attaches onto. So now that we have the skeleton here all drawn, it should be pretty simple to just add on the trapezius. So we know that it attaches here at the base of the skull, really close to the sternomastoid. So we have kind of like the base of the trapezius right here, and then it'll create a nice slope all the way down to the tip, to the end of the scapula here, right there. So we'll do the same thing on the other side. So a nice slope. So not, it doesn't bump out, at least not if you're a normal person. If you work out a lot, if you're on if you're on steroids, then that thing is going to change shape quite dramatically. But most of the time you'll have kind of a slope like this, probably even less pronounced than most people, but let's just leave it like this to make it a little bit easier to spot. And then we'll have the connection point here on top of the scapula, and then from there it kind of just points all the way down to the lower portion of the rib cage. So right about down here, so in the middle of the back, that's where it's going to end. So something like this. So of course, it's not going to be this. The angles are not going to be this sharp, so we'll smooth this out a little bit like this, and so you get kind of like this this weird concave diamond shape. So this is going to be the overall shape for the trapezius. Now, of course, we know that in the center here there's going to be the spine, and the trapezius is going to attach onto the spine in a number of locations. And so in the center here, there's not going to be much mass. So this is going to make way for the spine, and then the majority of the mass is going to be on each side of that, on each side of the spine. So we'll have a lot of mass right here, and so again, right down the center here, we're going to use a lighter shade to indicate that there's not going to be much mass there. It's going to be mostly just the attachment points for the muscle. And this is going to be a little bit bigger here in the center, and it's actually going to expose some of the portion of the spine here. So if you touch on your back, you can most likely feel that those couple vertebrae right behind your neck. And those, even though you can work out and really develop that trapezius, those are always going to be exposed. So there's not going to be any kind of growth here in the center. And of course, towards the bottom as well, it's going to be mostly flat. And here as well, along the attachment point on to the scapula. So now that we have all those attachment points, like I've mentioned before, whenever there's an attachment point, it means that there's not going to be much mass there, even when the muscle grows. Well, this means that what we're left with here is all the red is where the mass is actually going to grow. So we can start to draw kind of the volume on this. So I'll draw here on the right side, kind of like the different volumes that are going to make up this trapezius. So it's just kind of like a big cylinder here. All the way to the tip, and then it blends into another different cylinder right there. So something like that. So you're gonna have kind of like those two big tubes, these two big cylinders going up and blending into one another. And then here, if we draw the muscle fibers instead, so we have a lot of tension from this point here to the center of the neck right here. So we'll have lines like this, lines like this. There's going to be tension like this. And then here at the tip, the tension is going to be direct. And then at the bottom here, the tension becomes starts to be inclined more towards the bottom. And so that would be kind of all the tension points for that muscle. Now, the reason why I always draw those lines here, the lines that indicate the direction of the muscle fiber, is because that's going to be the line along which the muscle contracts. So it's not going to contract in this direction. It's not going to contract in that direction. It'll follow those same lines. So the muscle will contract like this. It'll contract like this. And it'll contract like this, depending on how it's stimulated. So you can also imagine, if we take, if we isolate this portion right here, it's going to be just one single part of the trapezius. But if this contracts, well, it's going to contract this way, right? It's not going to contract that way. It's not going to contract in diagonal. It's going to contract always along the fiber of the muscle. So let's say you were to do a shrug movement, for example. Well, the fiber would shorten, would contract, and the volume would be concentrated in a smaller distance, so then it would make the muscle appear to be thicker a little bit, but you would still maintain the same volume. All right, now if we draw the trapezius from the front here, it's definitely not going to be as visible from the back as it is from the back, but we will clearly see it. So if we trace again here, kind of like the attachment point in the back, considering that this head is like transparent, we are going to draw the nice slope. So going from there all the way to the tip of the scapula. So a slope like this. And then the same thing on the other side. All right. And now we know that it attaches here on the back of the scapula, but it also attaches in front here onto the clavicle, so a portion of the clavicle about this much. So we'll have the trapezius attached there, and then, well, it simply goes back up and joins with the rest in the back. And that is the section that is going to blend nicely into the line of the deltoid that we are going to take a look at next. But that would be kind of like the shape for it. And so in the darker shade of pink here in the back, you would have kind of like the other section of the trapezius that we don't quite see from this angle, but we would see from the back. So a good way to think of this is that, it starts from the back here and then wraps over the shoulder and then attaches onto the clavicles in the front. So this would be the basic shape for it. And then if we add in the direction of the fiber, well, it would be still following those lines here. So pretty simple, just follow the lines here. And then in the back, we already know those are the same lines here. This portion here is basically what we see back here, right? So those would be kind of those same lines. So from the front, it will look something like that. Then we can add also lighter shade of pink to indicate where the muscle is not going to grow too much at the extremities, of course, where the connection points are when they connect to when they attach onto the bones. All right, so the tricky part here is going to be from this angle as usual. So we are going to start in the same way. So the attachment point in the back of the head will be around there. So what we're going to do is start a slope and do a nice slope all the way down to the tip of the scapula right here, because that's where it's going to attach. So like that. And we can do the same thing on this other side right here. So slope, 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 and the slope would attach up here at the tip of the scapula, if we can imagine that it's about right there. All right, and then of course we know that in the front here is going to wrap around from the back onto the front, and then attach itself onto a portion of the clavicle. So right about there. And then that's going to wrap around and then fold in the back, just like that. And then we can do the same thing here. So imagine, you know, if this clavicle is something along those lines here, so it would attach right about there. And then of course, like I did on the front view here, you could probably see kind of like the other part, the one that's on the back, this portion here, through, you know, if we look in that hole right here. So of course this would all be covered with skin, so we wouldn't be able to see it normally, but in this case, when it's only the muscles, very likely that we would see that. So there you go. So now if we start to draw the fibers on here. All right, so this is pretty much the shape of, this is pretty much how you draw the trapezius onto the body, where it attaches itself. So as you can see here, when you place those bones, it makes things really simple. All that's left is just to attach the muscle to the bone structure that's already there. You know, as soon as you know where those attachment points are, it makes drawing the muscle really, really simple. But basically if we look at it from the side view, you know, the trapezius is going to be, so the bottom of the back is going to be like this, and then it'll bulge out, and then bulge out again, and connect to the head. So the head would be, that would be kind of like the back of the head right here. And you have the neck. And so the trap would go and fold in the front here and be essentially like this. And then you would have the joint, you know, the joint right there for the elbow. So you have this kind of like wrap around from the back onto the top of the shoulder. So this is how you draw the trapezius.